Hi, I'm Dr. Gwen. I'm a clinical psychologist who's been empowering disabled individuals, their families, and their support systems for over 20 years. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel, where I curate tools, share mindsets, and promote habits that serve this community's health, safety, and happiness. Also, hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a thing. In this episode, I interview Julia Moluf, residential manager at Best Buddies. I get an update on Best Buddies and what this infamous organization is up to these days. We do a deep dive into the Best Buddies living program, and I learn about their living model and how it aims to promote the independence of disabled adults while keeping true to inclusion. Julie and I have a fun conversation about necessary mindsets to have when working in our community and discuss the importance of presuming competence and putting disabled adults front and center in their lives, which is exactly where they need to be. Please enjoy this interview with Julia. Hi, Julia. Welcome to the channel. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here. So let's get started. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and telling the audience about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Julia Moluf, and I'm the residential manager for Best Buddies Living, which supports adults with disabilities in living independently. I was a volunteer for Best Buddies for about 9 years before I was lucky enough to join as staff last August. I was born and raised in San Diego, and am now living in Washington, D.C. for this role, which has been a ton of fun.
That is awesome. You know, I think the thing that really drew me to having an interview with you is that I have had an old school idea of Best Buddies and what Best Buddies is. And I think in learning more about Best Buddies today, what I realize is that Best Buddies has evolved.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I understand that you guys have multiple pillars at Best Buddies. It's no longer just the friendship mentorship that I think most people think of.
Yep.
Would you mind just giving us a little information about the pillars really quick before we go into your specific pillar?
Sure, of course. And I think you're totally right. We have our friendship pillar, and that's definitely what we're most well known for. We were founded in 1989 at Georgetown University with this idea that one-to-one friendships for people with and without disabilities can be really powerful. And so we're now in elementary schools and middle schools, high schools, colleges, and adult friendship programs across the country. So that program is still a huge part of us and is really strong. But we, as you mentioned, have grown so much from just that friendship pillar. So we also have our leadership pillar, and that focuses on self-advocacy skills and public speaking for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And then we also have our jobs pillar, which is one of my favorite. I just think the need is so great for adults with disabilities to find paid employment. Trying to bridge that 81% unemployment gap is really important to us. So working with different partnerships, companies, nationwide to find paid competitive employment for people with disabilities. And then most recently in 2019, we launched Best Buddies Living, which, just like everything else in Best Buddies, is inclusive. So we set out to provide inclusive housing opportunities for people with and without disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, right? Like, again, the friendship pillar is a thing that I think most people think about.
Sure.
And so to know that now there's this wonderful leadership pillar, which includes advocacy and communication and empowerment. Job pillar, you're so right. Unemployment. We have some of the most underemployed, right, individuals in our community. And then this idea of inclusion, just kind of weaving everything all together. So let's get into the living pillar, because this is where you are. You're squarely, literally and figuratively living in the living pillar for Best Buddies. So tell us about the program, the living pillar of Best Buddies.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, Best Buddies Living is brand new for the Best Buddies organization as a whole. So right now we just have one location, and that's here in Washington, D.C., and we have space for 6 residents. And we want those 6 residents to be half with disabilities and half without disabilities. That's a really important part of our model. And our residents with disabilities have a few things that we're looking for when we're recruiting. So one of the big things is that we work really closely with our jobs program. So all of our residents with disabilities work during the day. We're not a day program that has activities from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's really focused on that independence piece, and that includes having a job. And so we're also looking for residents who have activities of daily living kind of already down. And the things that I support them in as the on-site residential manager, I live right across the hall and here for support and any emergencies that may arise. And I do a lot of work in skills like grocery shopping, budgeting, taking the metro, keeping your room clean, communicating with a roommate, all those fun independent living skills. And aside from the jobs during the day, we also provide the supplemental social activities. So we have group dinners once a week. We do events throughout the month. DC is a great place for this program. It just provides us with so many fun opportunities and things to do in the community. And then additionally, we're partnered with Catholic University. So it's important for us to kind of have that university relationship. We think it really gives adults with disabilities an opportunity to be a part of a campus without maybe necessarily taking the curriculum. You know, a lot of adults with disabilities are not able to attend a 4-year traditional university. So one of my residents right now is actually interning at Catholic University here in DC, where he's able to be on campus, he's able to get job experience, interact with students, you know, eat at the dining hall, all those good things. So that's just a little bit about our program.
That's awesome. So the model is 6 residents. How many rooms in this place? It's like maybe like an apartment people imagine. What would it look like?
Yeah, for sure. So we're in a really large scale apartment building in the heart of Washington, D.C. So Best Buddies is just renting a couple of units from this bigger building. So we actually have 1 female unit and 1 male unit, each with 3 bedrooms. So everyone gets a private bedroom, and then you share a kitchen and a common space. But I think as Best Buddies Living continues to expand, you know, I think each location will look a little bit differently. We originally started Best Buddies Living in Los Angeles, and that was a single family home. So I think that depending on the location and the needs of, you know, the people in that area, the dynamic of exactly how we set up the housing may change a little bit. But that's what it looks like here in DC.
Yeah. So the model being 50% residents with disabilities, 50% without. The model also including a live-in or live close on-call support. And then the coordination then, it's not a day program. I think it's so important that you said that. So really you supporting the things outside of your 9 to 3, 9 to 5 kind of life. Exactly. But being closely connected then with the jobs pillars so that, you know, we're working on our vocational skills and ways to support ourselves. And then pushing into some of those social activities with a neighboring college, again, for that inclusive experience socially. So that's fantastic. What would you say, Julia, in your model, and I love that, you know, every, I think, location will have its own personality depending on where it's located, how many rooms there are, you know, maybe even the residents that make up, you know, that cohort, let's just say.
For sure.
What is really the right kind of resident for this program, you know, where when you get the right resident and that interfaces with what you provide and what your model is, like the magic, that's when the magic happens, right?
Exactly.
So like, what is that dialed in kind of in the pocket resident for your program right now?
For sure. And, you know, we're the first to say that this program is not for everyone. And luckily, inclusive housing is booming. And so I'm so lucky to work with other professionals in this field. And each one of us is serving a slightly different population. Maybe, you know, one of them needs on-site, nursing support, or maybe one of them doesn't have a residential manager on site. So there's a little bit more independence there. So I really think that we're open and honest about that this program isn't necessarily for everyone. And we want it not only to be a good fit for us, but for it to be a good fit for the resident as well. When I think about an ideal candidate with a disability for our program, there are three main things that come to mind. The first one is that job piece. So this resident doesn't necessarily have to have a job, but they have to be motivated to want to work. They have to be interested in, finding employment, and it can't be their parents who are interested for them. This has to be something that they're excited about, that they're motivated for. The second thing that comes to mind that I briefly mentioned is those activities of daily living. So we're not a licensed facility. We do not have nursing supports or anything like that. So things like taking medication, being able to get up in the morning, shower, feed yourself, all of those things, at least as our program is right now, are essential for success of that resident. And then the third thing, which is a bit more ambiguous, and is something we've kind of been learning as we go, is the ability to self-sustain during downtime. So because we're not, a day program, yes, we have group dinners, yes, we have events, but there are going to be times where you're not working and there's not a Best Buddies Living event scheduled. So, for that resident to be able to do things on their own, maybe it's doing a puzzle or coloring or whatever that looks like, or say to themselves, hey, I have a free evening, let me invite a friend over. I think that's really important to success here, just because that's how our program's structured. It's really, designed for that independent living. So those are kind of the three things that come to mind when I think about a successful candidate.
Yeah, that's great. I think that is, it's really important to know what to do with downtime.
Yeah. And it's hard even for me,
hard.
I'm living alone and I'm like ordering puzzles, and with COVID especially, it's a transition. It really is, especially if you're used to living at home with your parents and your siblings and you're going to soccer games and family dinners. It's an adjustment for everyone.
Yeah. And can you use your downtime productively?
Right.
In a way that's not going to be unhealthy,
Exactly.
I think many of my clients really know what they would do with downtime.
Yeah.
How to stop doing it or when to stop doing it to do other things that might not be as reinforcing or motivating, right? That's, absolutely. I think, where the rub can come in, and I'm sure, I can see how that's something that you're constantly evaluating and figuring out maybe how to work. I think when people hear this, I don't want people to think that they've got to come to you with all their ADLs and sequencing and scheduling under their belt. Obviously, that's not what you're saying. You're just saying that you can't help someone with kind of exceptional medical needs or exceptional behavioral or support needs, right? But you guys do use something really cool in your program to help guide residents through their day. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
I would love to. I'm the biggest fan of this program, and I appreciate you saying that. It's tough because ADL can kind of mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending on who you're chatting with. And, we kind of think of them as like the very basic ADLs. To your point, we're not expecting people to come in and be independent. They wouldn't need me if that was the case. We're really lucky to be working with a great program called Life Sherpa. We were introduced to them earlier this year, and it's truly been a game changer for Best Buddies Living. It's essentially an app on your phone that you can download, and myself as a residential manager who makes individualized support plans for each of my residents, I'm able to customize different routines for my residents throughout the day, throughout the week, whatever that looks like. So an example is every Monday, my residents get a notification on their phone that says, time to go grocery shopping. So they open this app in Life Sherpa and they can say, start weekly grocery shopping routine. And it has all these wonderful prompts and features. So the first slide is, assess your refrigerator, because one of the problems we've come across is that I'll open their fridge one day and there's like food in there from November. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not good. So the first step says assess your refrigerator, and it has a picture right there of a fridge. It has that visual cue. They're even able to press a speaker button. It can read the instruction to them. If it's something a little bit trickier, maybe, starting a washing machine, I can insert a YouTube link to how to start, that specific washing machine, and they can open that. There's also a timer feature. So if someone was struggling to brush their teeth for more than 10 seconds, I can put a 2-minute timer and they can't click to the next step until it's over. It just really provides a wide variety and a wide level of support that I can change for each resident, which is what I love about it so much. And so they go through this grocery shopping routine. It asks them to make a list. And then at the end of it, I have to see a picture of the clean fridge and a picture of the grocery list. So that comes right to my phone. And without me having to stand over their shoulder saying, okay, now do this and do that, and don't forget this and don't forget that, they're able to have that independence. They're able to be empowered with their own autonomy. But I can see and make sure that they're really doing it and that it's really happening. And if I get a grocery list that only has cookies on it, I can shoot a text over or knock on the door and say, hey, before you go grocery shopping, let's chat about, your choices or whatever. So that's just one example of the different routines I have set up for them. But like I said, I just love the autonomy it provides while still making sure that they're getting those supports and that someone's kind of able to monitor them, not necessarily right over their shoulder.
Yeah, I think it's very age appropriate. As a young adult, you don't necessarily want someone tapping on your shoulder all the time and in your space. No. And then you're using your phone, right? You're using your smartphone, which is a really appropriate everyday kind of technology device that all of us have.
Yes.
And I think it just allows for that true feeling of that middle ground or the gap between like independence and needing support, right? Like,
yes.
It offers that middle ground, and I think it's so great. And I know you and I, not obviously in this interview, have touched upon your love affair with Life Sherpa. So I thought we needed to bring it up. But you're seeing it used in real time in your program really effectively.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, it's been a game changer, and to your point, it provides just enough help. And the great thing about it is that maybe, right now it takes 10 steps for one of my residents to boil pasta, but maybe 6 months from now, I can take that down to 4 steps because they don't need to remember to put the salt in the water and to turn off the stove. Those things are, more of a habit now. So it's an awesome app. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what a lovely way to empower, this population, to help them routinize activities on their own so that they don't need as much prompting. And then they can, reserve some of their cognitive bandwidth for other stuff, that they need to do. So that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Hey, Julia, what would you say is like one of your favorite strategies that you use to promote development and growth? We've already talked about Life Sherpa, so we can't list that one. But what would you say is like a go-to strategy you use a lot with your residents to help them become more independent or to continue to develop and grow?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really great question. And there's some things like Life Sherpa that are, so tangible, right? It's an app that I can open and look at it. But I think, something that I refer to that's a little bit less tangible and a little bit more just a mindset for me is a phrase I've been hearing a lot in this community, which is nothing about us without us. I think it's really important for me as someone who is a residential manager and providing supports to be empowering this individual to be a part of their decision making. I make a point of not having a conversation with mom and dad without looping my resident in, at least letting them know that I'm having it or asking them to join us. Or, like with Life Sherpa, that's another great example. Maybe there's something they're not comfortable talking, with me about necessarily, the ins and outs of, I don't know, shaving or something. And so being able to just remember that, is a community that I don't identify with. You know, I'm an able-bodied person, and it is just so important to be listening to their needs, maybe not what they should be doing or where they should be at or where their parents want them to be, but just really listening to where they are and what they need at this time and meeting them there. I just really try to remind myself of that, both, you know, in my role as a residential manager, but just as an employee of Best Buddies and a person who, you know, prides herself on, you know, being an ally for this community, is just making sure that I'm really listening to the people that I'm serving.
Yeah, I think that's so fantastic, because if we really want to truly empower the people that we support, we do need to respect and trust that they can be the main driver of their life, you know, and to include them at every turn. I mean, even from an educational perspective, if they're not included in these problem-solving sessions or decision-making sessions, how will they ever learn to do any of that? You know, and I find that, you know, a lot of times we don't intentionally do this, but that this population's underestimated. And so, and that there's a lot of reasons for that, but the ability to just presume that they're competent to be involved is so critical. Yeah, I do love Nothing About Us Without Us as well. And I love even the idea of like, you know, with you, not for you, you know, we do it together. And anytime that we are doing anything that involves you, you're doing it with me. So then at least you're learning how to do it and you're involved, you know? But I love that. That's so awesome. How about, you know, the other thing that I love to just kind of unpack is, you know, the empowerment of skills. So the Nothing About Us Without Us is a wonderful mindset. If you could only choose one skill to empower in your residents, what would that be and why?
Yeah, it's a tough question, right? I think there's so many things that I see in them that they don't always, you know, see in themselves, or society doesn't always see. So there's so many things, but I think if I had to choose one, it would be to empower them to own and be able to talk about their disability without feeling any sort of shame or, you know, like it's something that they have to hide or overcompensate for. You know, I think the disability community is moving towards this place of true pride and, you know, taking their disability in stride. And I also think that ultimately, you know, the only way society is going to stop feeling uncomfortable about this big taboo word of disability is by talking about it. And I was just at an event last night with a Best Buddies participant, and I overheard him introducing himself to someone. And he said, you know, hi, my name is such and such, and I'm autistic. And it was just like this for him. That's just how he introduces himself. And I just think that, you know, that is so important. And I think for him to have that ownership and that pride, and for him just to know that that's a part of him and not something that we need to sugarcoat or call special or any of those things is so important. So, and everyone's at a different stage in that journey, depending on how they grew up and, you know, kind of what their experiences have been. But if I had to pick one thing, I think that would be, you know, just to feel that sense of ownership and being able to tell people, you know, confidently that this is just a part of who you are.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with it.
No,
right.
Nothing.
There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. It's so interesting that you say this, because even as I kind of reflect on my professional career, you know, early on, we were really encouraged to use person-centered language. And so it was always, you know, a child with autism or a child with a disability. And then as I, you know, continued to support my clients, and now I only support teens and young adults. What I find is this movement to identity first language, and that doing so is a very empowering place to be, an empowering no shame place to be. And so they've really taught me to use identity first language. And it really isn't until someone says, you know, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I'll make that modification when we're working together. But it is a conversation that I have with all of my clients, which is, how do you sit with this? How do you refer to it?
Yes.
How do you identify with this?
Yes.
And it's so empowering because, again, it's like, oh, wait, you can talk about this. Like,
right. Well, and
you know?
I think, as, professionals in this field and, even in my undergrad, which was a speech, language, and hearing science background, so kind of focused on, speech therapy and audiology and things like that, we were taught explicitly that person first is the correct way to do things. And, even for years as a volunteer for Best Buddies, all these things, that was the norm. And so I would hear, and only in, the last several years have I really started to kind of hear about this movement. And this plays right into the nothing about us without us, right? All these able-bodied people were like, this is what sounds better, this is what's nice. And I think for a lot of people with disabilities, that's still their go-to. Maybe that's still what they prefer. I think, both are obviously valid choices, but what's really incredible is, how many testimonies I've heard of people with disabilities who have said they've been corrected. They say, oh, I'm a disabled woman. And someone will say, oh, don't say that. You're a woman with a disability. And, it's their choice to see how they identify and, what feels empowering to them. And of course, like you said, I respect both ways, of course, but I have such, I'm so just, I don't even know what the word is. I just love the empowerment behind the identity first. And I think that the people who choose to identify that way are just, breaking down those stereotypes and those walls, kind of one introduction at a time. It doesn't have to be taboo. Nothing about them is, special other than they just have this disability. And that's just a part of who they are. Like, everything else is a part of us. So it's an interesting topic, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I would agree. I see some of my clients really taking the role of activism in this, actually, where they're really trying to change the way in which they're perceived and the comfort level in their surrounding communities. So it's so cool. And I think it's really relevant as we talk about this Best Buddies living pillar. I mean, we are talking about life where like rubber's meeting the road and life is happening. Yeah. And so this language, this conversation, how we empower our clients or these residents in their own goals and where they see themselves, and is really important that they're first in that, and to trust that they know. I'm not saying they don't need help, but they know.
Everybody needs help. One of the things we talk about when we, first onboard someone is being independent means knowing when you need help and when to ask for help. And that doesn't differ, whether or not you're disabled.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we use healthy interdependence in my practice, and that idea that everyone's interdependent on each other, and absolutely. What does that look like from a healthy perspective? Because I think sometimes my clients hear the word independent and they think alone, and that's not what we want. I wouldn't want to be independent in that way either, And so,
no, of course not.
But that's awesome. What an awesome program! I really hope that Best Buddies can make it work in LA again. I'm biased because I'm here in Pasadena, California, but I really hope that they can make it work again.
I think so too. We're, it was so circumstantial with COVID. Otherwise, the program was thriving. And so I was born and raised in San Diego, so I'm partial to Southern California too. But now that COVID is closer to being in the rearview mirror, our sights are set really high on expansion. So I have confidence we'll be back in California, hopefully soon.
Yay. Well, I am banking on it for sure, Julia. So if someone's listening to this and they want to find out more about Best Buddies, not even just a living pillar, but all the other pillars that, you had spoken about earlier, what's the best way for them to do that?
For sure. Bestbuddies.org. You can't go wrong. You can find everything I mentioned there today. The friendship pillar, the leadership pillar, the jobs pillar, and living. There's also, a full directory for each state. So depending on where you live, or even if you're in a different country, you can find a direct staff person to reach out to.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Julia, for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so great.
Wasn't that great? If you're interested in finding out more about Best Buddies, their information is in the description below. If you got any value from this interview, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Doing so helps to get this information to others just like you. See you in the next episode, and thanks for watching.